everybody. Let me get my music stopped there. It caught me by surprise. Welcome, Sunday night. It's time for One Word. And to all you fathers out there, happy Father's Day. I hope you had a good day. I had a good day. Let me put a little picture up. I spent some time with these folks today, my family. That's not a picture of today. That was several months back. It was a little colder on that day. But anyway, we had a great lunch today, spent a little time together, and it's just always fun to be with the family. And so, yes, as I wrap up tonight, we get into the evening. I had an awesome day. I hope you did as well. So it is time for One Word. It's that time that we get together and we talk about one word for the week that we might put a little light on, shine a spotlight on, in order to perhaps improve our leadership, or it might even just help us to be a better person. You know, it might be our spouse, our friends, our teammates might like us a little bit better if we're able to shine a little light on this one word that we're focusing on each week. So this week, as I was thinking about Father's Day, this week was inspired by this gentleman. You see, both my mom and my dad, Harold and Ella Riddle, they both passed away way too early. I was in my early 30s when they both passed, a year apart. But I just tell you, they made a profound impact on my life and my leadership and just who I am. A lot of the, if you find any character values in me, all the good ones come from these two people. And so today being Father's Day, I thought, well, why don't I spend some time thinking about my dad, which I did. But if I was thinking about my dad, what is one word that would describe him? In fact, I asked Stacy that today. We were sort of brainstorming a little bit, and there's a lot. There's a whole bunch of things that I could talk about for hours about this man, and just what an incredible person he was and what an influence he was in my life. But there was a word that kept coming to the top that I just wanted to talk about. So he inspired our word for this week, which is called dependable. The word is being dependable, dependability. And, that may be a word you're like, wow, I mean, couldn't you come up with something that was a little more, exciting, or something that would make the front page news? Dependable is just kind of one of those words. Let me just tell you, dependability is a word or a character trait that shapes not only your relationships, but shapes who you are. Let me describe. So my father, when I think of being dependable, here's a couple examples that I would describe. His word was his bond. So in other words, you could depend on his word. If he said to you, if it's Sunday, and he said, hey, tomorrow I'll call you at 2 o'clock. You know what time he called you? 2 o'clock. Not 2:01 or 2:02, or he didn't call you at 2:30 and say, oh, I'm sorry, I got behind, or I forgot, or whatever. He called you at 2. His word was his bond. If he had a meeting that he needed to show up, he was always there on time. If he made a commitment to somebody, he always followed through. If it was he was in the textile business, if he had a delivery he had to make, he always made good on it. Now, I'm sure he wasn't perfect, but if there was a mistake, he never made an excuse. In other words, he just owned up to it, said, sorry, I messed up, But that was rare, because he really looked at his word as his bond, which really shaped his dependability in the eyes of others. And so when he passed away, like I said, he passed away when I was 30. At his funeral, he owned a business, a textile business, and he had people who'd worked for him for 20, 30 years. They came up to me at the funeral home and they said, he was the fairest man I ever worked for. Now, what did they mean? He was dependable. Right? In other words, it wasn't, hey, he was my best friend, although he was great friends with him. He paid me a lot of money. It wasn't all these other things. He was the funniest guy to be around. He was the fairest guy. And the reason they said that is because they knew they could count on him. He always showed up. He was always consistent. He was always dependable. His word was his bond. So hats off to my dad. Happy Father's Day. Hope I'll get to see him again, obviously, one day. But I just say he inspired this word. So let's talk a little bit about this. Can we agree that the bar is pretty low when it comes to dependability? I mean, it just is. I had an example not too long ago. Over to my, whether you're looking right or left, over on this side is a monitor, big monitor that Dell makes. And this is the second monitor that I had, because I ordered one that was a different size and a different kind of monitor. And when I ordered it, I asked the guy, I said, if it doesn't work, can I send it back? And he said, absolutely. All you need to do is email me and I'll take care of it. Well, guess what? The monitor didn't work. And guess what I did? I emailed him. And I don't mean to call Dell out. I think they make good products, but I will describe this situation I had. So I emailed him. I didn't get a response. I emailed again. He said, let me look into it. Then it went back and forth. And then eventually I talked to probably 6, 7, 8 different people trying to get it returned. I finally got it returned, not from the gentleman who told me, hey, you can count on me, just email me. I got it returned, and then 4 weeks later, I'm still waiting for it to be credited back to my credit card. So I go through that, kind of list again. Hey, you promised I could return it and so forth. And then finally one day I got a guy on the phone and he said, by the end of the day, you will hear from me because we will have this resolved. 3 days later, hadn't heard a word. So what does that mean? Well, they may make great products, but at least in my experience, they're not very dependable. So I finally did get it resolved. But it's amazing the influence or lack of influence that you can have by basically just doing what you say you're going to do. Here's another example of dependability. When I was in the marketplace, I had a company called Riddle & Company. It was a textile company. Sorry for this old photograph. I had to take a picture with my cell phone of it, and then so it's kind of crooked there. But this is a great group of people I loved working with. And I don't think she's in this picture, but when I started, we had a manufacturing facility and we had 3 shifts. And so on the 3rd shift, I was at that time, I was young. I was in my early to mid 30s maybe. And I was hiring people much older than me and had much, much more experience than I did. So one of the things I decided to do is on 3rd shift, you got people who just know what they're doing. They've been doing it for a long time. And I wanted to gain some credibility. Here's this young buck guy. So I said to this lady who worked 3rd shift, her name was Ann. I said, Ann, I'm going to come in for the next 2 weeks. And I'm going to come in, I think it was like 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. And I'm going to work for you. In other words, you tell me what you want me to do, and I'll empty the trash cans. I'll lift boxes. I'll do whatever you want me to do, around the looms, if you need me to figure out how to tie a weaver's knot, whatever that is. And so I did, and I did that for a couple of weeks. Well, at the end of that, my relationship with Ann, I mean, we bonded. She was almost like a mother figure to me, but she was just as sweet as she could be. And many, many, many years later, we were sitting together in the conference room, and I said, remember when I came out and worked that week? I said, well, what did you think? And, I thought she would have said, well, you got pretty good. Or I thought she would have said, you got a little faster, and I was actually pretty impressed with you. But you know what she said? The number one thing that made the most impression, she said, I didn't think you'd show up the second day. She said, I thought it was all mouth, all words, and there was no way you would stick this out for 2 weeks. By just the fact that I showed up for 2 weeks, just showed up, made a huge impression on her. So this idea of dependability is pretty significant word to focus on. All right, let's talk about, let me kind of paint a picture for you of what dependability looks like. This is what a dependable person looks like. Dependable person isn't easily discouraged when faced with obstacles, but instead finds ways to improve and overcome. No excuses. I never heard my dad make excuses, ever. I was thinking about that today, and I don't know that I've thought about that before, but I don't know that I've ever heard him just make a bunch of excuses if he didn't get something done. Second piece here to paint a picture for you. A dependable person is known to be trustworthy and believable. You know, as I said, that bar is pretty low these days. So just being trustworthy and believable. You know how you become believable? You do what you say you're going to do. And then the third one here, a dependable person sets a standard for others to follow. I mean, don't you want to follow and be around dependable people, right? I mean, if it's people that you know you can count on, you enjoy being around those people. Look at this slide. This is an old picture. I used to have it in my office, gosh, 20, 30 years ago, tell my age here. And it hung in the office, and it says, I had to put the title up there at the top so you make it big enough so you could read it. But the road is not always to the swift, but to those who keep on running, right? Those who keep showing up, those who keep doing what they say they're going to do, those that are dependable. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to go ahead and post a comment if you would. I'd love to engage you at the end of this, just a few of you, but talk about the value of dependability and talk about just, how significant is that to you? Is that, do you feel like you're a dependable person? How do you feel when you interact with somebody that's dependable? Who's the most dependable person that you ever know? Just put a comment or two and we'll come back to it in just a second. Love to chat a little bit about that. All right, here's what I want to do. I'm going to leave you with 5 practices or 5 things that will help you become more dependable. All right, here's number 1. Practice consistency. Big part of dependability is just be consistent, right? I mean, just show up, just do the same thing. So if you're thinking, boy, I struggle with this dependability piece, pick something this week that you're going to say, you know what, I'm going to be consistent with this, whatever it is. I'm going to, get up at this time of the day, or I'm going to take a walk in the evening, or I'm going to call 3 people that I haven't talked to in a while, but I'm going to be consistent. I'm going to pick something and I'm going to follow through and be consistent with it and do it every single day. That will help you kind of work those dependability muscles. All right, number 2, finish. Finish things, right? We all know people who start a lot of things, but they don't finish them. So one of the best ways that you can be known as a dependable person is if you have a project or somebody gives you something to do, or even you state to someone, hey, I'm planning on doing this, make sure you finish it. I always say when somebody, does a lot of talking and they like to tell you all the things they're going to do, and in my mind, I'll say, well, they've got the talking part down, right? Let's see if they can finish it. So make sure, make an inventory this week and say, how many things have I been saying that I'm going to do, but I haven't even started, or I'm halfway through and I hadn't finished. So dependability means that you finish things. All right, number 3, don't allow distractions to create excuses. We've had that, right? Somebody walks in, I'm sorry I didn't get this done because I had this and this and this and this. So if you have distractions, which we are going to have, and if people are depending on us, it's part of our job to carve away those distractions as best we can. But if for some reason we don't hit the deadline or we let somebody down, don't make excuses. Don't allow those distractions to turn you into an excuse machine. Just don't allow them to create excuses. Charge through, be dependable, and finish. Number 4, show up on time. So that's one of those, right? I mean, you're either somebody who shows up on time or you don't show up on time. Usually you fall in one category or the other. But I'll give you an example. This week I had a Zoom call. I'm doing a lot of that, obviously, and I used the same Zoom link, and I was at the end of a call. I had 2 calls back to back. I was at the end of a call. We had about 10 minutes to go. And then all of a sudden, the next call, one of the guys pops up on the screen. And so he just sort of, pops into the thing. And I said, hey, Bob, I'm sorry, our call didn't start till about 10 minutes, and he went away really quick. And I felt sort of bad. And so when we got back to the call, after when it was his time, he came on. He said, "I'm so sorry." He said, "But to be honest with you, I'm doing what I always do is I show up early." And I told him, I said, "I love that about you. I love that you're early. Never apologize. So just show up on time." And then number 5, remember that your word really is your bond. I mean, just think about that. Think about anything that you have said or are saying this week, and think before you say it, am I going to follow through on it? If I'm not 100% convinced that I'm going to follow through, maybe I should not say it, right? Because your character, can kind of get some dents in it and can become scarred by this one, probably more than anything. Is you've got to make sure that your word is really your bond. And if it is, like my father, if your word's your bond, you'll be known as a dependable person. All right, let's look at some comments here, and let's see anybody has anything. Let's look here. Suzanne says dependability equals credibility equals trust. Absolutely. Could not agree with that more. One leads to the other, and they're all basically the same. Carly says yes to being on time, and yes, she's on the side of the kind of with me there, and I love that about her. And yes, she definitely always wants to be on time. Suzanne also says hashtags excuses are gross. Boy, isn't that right? I mean, we hear excuses over and over and over. But wouldn't it be great there's always these conditional statements, and I do them too sometimes. Sorry, I didn't because, and sometimes I have to catch myself and just say, hey, I'm sorry. It was on me. I messed up. Instead of putting that tag in that has those excuses. All right, I think that's all the comments I think I see here, except a couple of Happy Father's Days. I appreciate that. Appreciate all of you who are kind of joining in and so forth. I've got one more slide maybe to leave you with, and let me put this up. So, we talk about values, and sometimes values we're born with them, and sometimes we're not. But with dependability, this is one of those values that, let me just tell you, dependability, being dependable, it's a choice. It's not a talent. It's not a gift. It's not something that God said, I'm going to make that person dependable and that person not dependable. It's just not the way it works. You choose whether you want to be dependable or not. I mean, it's just a choice that you make. I like to think I'm dependable. There have been times in my life when I'm not dependable. And so I believe that we make that choice. So here's what I'm going to do. I want to encourage you. I'm looking here. Somebody said amen. That's right. We choose to be dependable. I'm going to challenge you this week. Hey, make that a choice. Just kind of put a spotlight on that word and say, this week I am going to choose to be dependable so that others can count on me. All right. Thanks for joining and doing this. I wish you would share it around with some people. And again, it's just trying to get a community of people that want to come together on Sunday night, focus on one word to help us to be better human beings with others as we interact with others in the coming week. So make it a good week. And thanks again. Have a good evening.